The Montana sun hung heavy over Red Elk Crossing, baking the dusty streets into cracked leather. That summer of 1879, the air smelled of burnt pine and secrets. When the stagecoach groaned to a stop outside Miller's boarding house, nobody paid much mind to the shadow in the corner until she moved. The girl unfolded herself like a pocket knife, all sharp angles and rust. Her hat hid everything but the stubborn set of her jaw, and that damn carpet bag she clung to like it held the devil himself. Across the way, Jesse Colton, ex-cavalry current problem solver, took a slow drag off his cigarette. He'd seen that look before, the kind of tired that comes from running, not resting. She moved like a spooked Mustang, all jittery steps and sideways glances. When old Mrs. Miller offered a hand, the girl recoiled like she'd been handed a rattlesnake. "Odessa," she muttered, though the name sounded borrowed. Upstairs, her window stayed shut tight, even when the heat turned the boarding house into a Dutch oven. Jesse noticed. He noticed everything, like how she haunted the livery stable every afternoon, sitting bone still on a nail keg like she was trying to become part of the woodwork. On the sixth day, he brought 2 tin cups of coffee black as midnight. "Wyoming's better for hiding," he said, sliding one toward her. "Montana folk notice things." Her fingers twitched, first real life he'd seen in her. That's when the church bell started clanging like the world was ending. Some fool had spooked the Clayton boys' cattle drive, and now Main Street was a river of horns and cussing. Jesse moved without thinking, shoving Odessa behind a water trough as a longhorn splintered the hitching post where she'd been sitting. When the dust settled, her coffee cup was crushed, but her eyes held. Her eyes were alive for the first time. "You're right," she said, voice rough as a saw blade. "This territory's terrible for disappearing." And just like that, Jesse knew he'd stepped into something deeper than a prairie dog hole. The next morning, he left a Colt single-action army on her windowsill. Some lessons are better learned with iron in your hand. The scar on Odessa's wrist wasn't the only one. Jesse had seen enough battlefield wounds to know a brand when he saw one. This one was deliberate, like a rancher marking cattle. He didn't mention it, not even when they passed the saloon, and some fool started hollering about pretty strays. Jesse just hooked his thumb in his belt, slow and deliberate, until the drunk got the message and shut his mouth. Odessa didn't flinch, but her fingers dug into that damned carpet bag like she was holding onto the edge of a cliff. Then came the storm. One of those Montana tempests that rolled in like Judgment Day, turning the creek into a roaring beast and shaking the boarding house walls. Mrs. Miller found Odessa curled in the hallway, hands clamped over her ears like the thunder was cannon fire. "It's just weather, child," the widow said. But Jesse knew better. He tossed her a flask of whiskey, the good stuff, not that rotgut the miners drank, and said, "Hell of a night to be alone." Odessa took a swallow like it was medicine. Then another. "You ever seen a barn burn?" she asked suddenly, voice raw. "The way the beams scream when they go—" Jesse didn't answer. He just sat on the floor beside her boots propped against the wall and told her about the time he'd ridden through a hailstorm in Dakota Territory where the ice chunks were big as fists. "Lost 3 horses," he said, "but the 4th that mare outran the damn storm like it was personal." Odessa's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. By August, the whole town knew to leave her be, except for the Clayton boys who hadn't learned a damn thing from that cattle stampede. One afternoon, Jesse caught the younger one following Odessa's morning path, grinning like a coyote eyeing a rabbit. He didn't lay a hand on her, but Jesse made sure the kid understood the consequences anyway, using the hitching post as a teaching aid. "You're making a scene," Odessa said later, watching him wipe blood off his knuckles. "Yup," Jesse agreed, spitting into the dust. "And next time it'll be a funeral." The real change came at the mercantile ruins. Odessa started stacking stones from the old foundation, methodical as a mason, when Jesse asked why she jerked her chin at the scorched earth. Things shouldn't stay broken. He joined her without a word, hauling rocks until their hands were blistered. By sundown, they'd built a low wall, crooked but standing. That night, for the first time, Odessa left her window open. The breeze carried the scent of sagebrush and something else, something that might have been hope. Then the letter arrived. Some busybody from Cheyenne had written to the sheriff asking about a runaway bride matching Odessa's description. Jesse burned it in the stove before she could see, but not before noticing the name at the bottom, Elias Grayson. Husband my ass. That was a name that needed removing from this world. He oiled his Colt that evening humming. Some men didn't deserve the air they breathed. The fence post Jesse was wrestling with suddenly felt lighter when Odessa's shadow fell across it. She didn't offer help, just stood there arms crossed watching him sweat like a preacher in a brothel. "You're doing it wrong," she finally said. Jesse squinted up at her. "That's so—" She stepped forward, nudged the post with her boot. "Needs to go deeper. Lean into it, not against it." He opened his mouth to argue, then noticed the calluses on her hands. Ranch hands. Hers. So he shut up and let her show him. By sundown, they'd rebuilt half the fence. Odessa worked like someone who'd spent years fixing things that kept breaking. When Jesse tossed her his canteen, she drank like she'd forgotten water existed. "You ever work cattle?" he asked, wiping dirt off his neck. She handed the canteen back. "Enough to know bulls are smarter than most men." That got a laugh out of him, rough and unexpected like a gunshot in church. The next morning, Jesse found a pair of gloves on his saddle. Good ones, thick leather with no nonsense stitching, no note, just like those damned boots she'd been hoarding. When he rode past the boarding house, Odessa was scrubbing the porch steps like her life depended on it. He tipped the gloves at her. "These got blown up by the wind too." She didn't look up. "Figured you'd ruin your hands otherwise." Then came the Sunday the Clayton boys decided to test their luck again. This time, they brought friends 3 drifters with whiskey courage and bad intentions. They cornered Odessa behind the livery, laughing about wildflowers needing picking. Jesse was halfway across town when he heard the first scream. By the time he got there, one drifter was on his knees clutching his nose, another was whimpering over a dislocated shoulder, and Odessa had the youngest Clayton by the collar, her knife at his throat. "Say it again," she hissed. "Say one more goddamn word about what women are for." The kid pissed himself. Literally. Jesse would have found it hilarious if he wasn't so busy being proud. That evening, the sheriff suggested Odessa might want to move along. Jesse leaned against the jailhouse door, cleaning his revolver with exaggerated care. "Funny," he drawled. "I don't recall seeing her break any laws, but I do recall 4 men assaulting a woman. You fixing to arrest them too, or just the ones who fight back?" The sheriff suddenly remembered an appointment elsewhere. Odessa started wearing the knife openly after that, a mean little Arkansas toothpick strapped to her thigh. Jesse pretended not to notice until she joined him for supper at Mrs. Miller's, where the widow served stew with a side of pointed looks. "You teaching her bad habits, Jesse Colton?" Mrs. Miller asked, eyeing the blade. Odessa stirred her stew. "He didn't teach me a damn thing," she said, and for the first time there was something like fire in her voice. "I already knew how to survive." Jesse hid a grin in his coffee. Hell, she was going to be just fine. The churchgoers noticed Odessa. Of course, this town noticed everything, but nobody dared speak to her. Not after what happened to the Clayton boys. Reverend Pike droned on about repentance while sunlight bled through the stained glass painting her hands in fractured colors. Jesse watched from the back, amused as she endured the sermon like a soldier standing inspection. When the collection plate came around, she dropped in a single bullet instead of a coin. The old deacon nearly swallowed his dentures. Afterward, Jesse caught up to her by the horse trough. "Subtle," he remarked, nodding toward the church. She shrugged. "They want my soul, they can work for it." A gust of wind sent yellow cottonwood leaves skittering around their boots like fleeing gold. Jesse reached out on impulse, plucking a leaf from her braid. She didn't pull away. "You ever think about staying?" he asked, rolling the leaf stem between his fingers. "Past winter, I mean." Odessa studied the mountains, their peaks already dusted with snow. "Depends," she said. "You got a decent stove at your place." Jesse choked on his own spit. 2 days later, the first real storm hit. It came howling down from Canada, turning the creek into a frozen snarl and sealing the town indoors. Mrs. Miller found them playing poker in the boarding house kitchen, Odessa winning hand after hand, with the blank expression of a hangman. "Cheat," Jesse accused, tossing down his cards. She smirked. "Or you're just terrible at bluffing." The widow snorted into her knitting. "Lord save us 2 stubborn mules in one winter. I'll need more whiskey." The thaw came early, bringing mud and rumors. A rider from Cheyenne brought news of a man asking about a dark-haired woman with a knife and a temper. Jesse's hand froze on his saddle cinch. Odessa, kneading dough at the boarding house table, didn't even look up when he told her. "Elias won't come himself," she said, flour dusting her wrists like pale scars. "He'll send others. He always does." The dough hissed as she punched it down. "You still got that Colt you left on my windowsill." Jesse smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Got something better." He led her to the root cellar, where a long crate lay hidden under burlap. Inside gleamed a Winchester 73 oiled and ready. "Happy Christmas," he said. Odessa ran a finger along the barrel. "You're assuming I've been good." The next morning, she was gone. So was the rifle. Jesse didn't follow, just saddled his sorrel and rode fence lines until his hands were raw. Mrs. Miller left a lantern burning in the window. 3 days passed. 4. On the 5th dawn, the sorrel whinnied before Jesse was fully awake. He reached for his revolver just as the door creaked open. Odessa stood framed in sunlight, the Winchester slung across her back and blood crusted on her sleeve. "It's done," she said, voice steady as stone. Behind her, tethered to a scrub pine, stood 2 unfamiliar horses laden with supplies. Jesse took in the bulging saddlebags, the fresh bullet graze on her arm, the way her eyes no longer flinched from his. He poured 2 whiskeys, handed her one. "To new beginnings," he said. Odessa clinked her glass against his. "To staying." The first morning in Jesse's cabin, Odessa woke to the smell of burning biscuits. She found him cursing at the stove shirtless and half awake, poking at charred lumps with a fork. "I was trying to," he began, but she just shouldered past him, snatching the fork. "Move! You're worse at this than poker." Jesse watched, grinning, as she salvaged breakfast with the efficiency of a battlefield surgeon. When she slid a plate toward him, edible if ugly, he caught her wrist. Not hard, just enough to feel her pulse. "Welcome home," he said. Winter deepened its grip. The cabin became a world of its own, crackling hearth, the scratch of Jesse's knife whittling by lamplight, Odessa mending clothes with stitches tighter than piano wire. One frozen midnight, she startled awake to Jesse's hand on her shoulder. "Hear that?" he whispered. Outside, wolves howled at the moon, but beneath it, hooves. Too many too close. Odessa had the Winchester loaded before Jesse finished buckling his gun belt. They found 3 men trying to bust open Jesse's smokehouse. Idiots, desperate ones, judging by their hollow cheeks. Odessa's rifle clicked in the silence. "Next sound you make better be your saddles creaking," Jesse drawled. The leader spat. "We heard there was a woman here worth money." Odessa's shot took the hat clean off his head. "You heard wrong," she said. The would-be thieves left at a gallop, one of them sobbing about that Grayson bastard's bounty. Jesse didn't speak until they were back inside the door, barred. "You knew they'd come eventually." Odessa reloaded methodically. "I did." She met his eyes. "You still good with your word about me walking away if I need to?" Jesse stoked the fire. "Always. But you won't." The certainty in his voice made her pause. "How do you know?" He tossed a log onto the flames. "Because you shot near that fool instead of through him. That's not someone who's running." By spring, the bounty hunters stopped coming. Maybe Elias Grayson ran out of money. Maybe he ran out of luck. Odessa didn't care enough to find out. She had better things to do, like teaching Jesse how to plant beans in straight rows. It's not a damn cavalry charge, Colton, or watching him lose spectacularly to Mrs. Miller at chess every Sunday. The morning they rode into town to file a land claim together, the clerk blinked at them. "You two married?" Jesse opened his mouth, but Odessa spoke first. "We're partners." Her boot nudged Jesse's under the table. "That a problem?" The clerk took in her knife, Jesse's lazy grin, and the way their signatures tangled together at the bottom of the deed. "No, ma'am," he squeaked. That night on their porch, Jesse handed Odessa a peach perfectly ripe this time. She bit into it, juice running down her wrist. "Wind blow this into your hand too," she teased. Jesse kissed the sticky sweetness from her fingers. "Nope," he said. "This one's just for you." Somewhere east, a ghost of a man kept searching. But in Red Elk Crossing, the earth turned green again, and Odessa Jameson finally stopped looking over her shoulder. The ribbon wasn't the only thing Odessa dug up that day. That night, as Jesse banked the fire, she pulled a small wooden box from her saddlebag, the kind that might have held cigars once now weathered smooth. "Found this too," she said, popping the lid. Inside lay a child's tooth, a river-polished stone, and a lock of hair tied with string. Jesse didn't ask whose. He just whistled low. "Hell of a treasure." Odessa snapped the box shut. "Didn't know I still wanted it till I saw it." Come morning, Jesse surprised her with a new box carved from cherry wood with a latch that clicked like a gun cocking. "For the next set of treasures," he said, tossing it to her as she saddled the sorrel. Odessa turned it over in her hands. "You're getting soft, Colton," he grinned. "Don't spread that around." Summer brought a different kind of digging. Odessa started a garden where the old smokehouse had stood turning the scorched earth with a vengeance. Jesse came home one evening to find her elbow-deep in dirt hair escaping its braid, cursing at a stubborn root. "That's my shirt you're ruining," he observed, leaning on the fence. She wiped sweat with his sleeve. "Our shirt now." The words hung between them, simple as laundry, seismic as a vow. Then the letter arrived. Not from Elias Grayson, God rot that bastard, but from a lawyer in Deer Lodge. Jesse found Odessa staring at the envelope like it might bite. "You want me to open it?" She shook her head, slitting the seal with her knife. The paper crackled as she unfolded it. Then her knees buckled. Jesse caught her before she hit the porch steps. "Turns out I had a cousin," she said hoarsely. "One who didn't forget me." The letter mentioned an inheritance, a pittance really from an aunt she'd never met. But the amount didn't matter. What mattered was the postscript, "You're not alone." Jesse poured 2 fingers of whiskey. "To family," he toasted. Odessa clinked her glass against his. "To choosing your own." That fall, they rode out to the river bend again, this time together. Odessa didn't bury anything. Instead, she pressed the cherrywood box into Jesse's hands. Inside lay a bullet casing from the first time they'd shot together a dried peach pit, and a sketch of the cabin Jesse had drawn on the back of a flour sack. "Figured we should start fresh," she said. Jesse added his mother's wedding band, the one he'd carried since Vicksburg. "For when you're ready," he said. Odessa didn't cry, but that night for the first time, she didn't sleep with her back to the door. Winter came early that year. The wolves howled closer, and in a cabin by the cottonwoods, 2 people who'd once been broken learned how to be whole together. The birchwood box clicked open to reveal a set of drafting tools, compass ruler, a fine-pointed stylus that caught the firelight. Jesse watched Odessa's fingers hover over them, hesitant as a doe at a creek. "Stole these off a Prussian engineer after Shiloh," he admitted. "Figured they'd suit you better than collecting dust in my saddlebag." Odessa picked up the compass, testing its weight. "You're full of surprises, Colton." "Keep living, you'll find more," he said, and the way he said it like there were decades stretched out before them, not just seasons, made her throat tighten. They broke ground for the greenhouse when the thaw came, the earth still stubborn with frost. Jesse hauled stones for the foundation, while Odessa mixed mortar, her new cloak discarded on a stump sleeves rolled to the elbow. Mrs. Miller arrived unannounced, bearing a basket of biscuits and a look that said she'd known about this project before they did. "About time someone grew decent rosemary in this godforsaken territory," she declared, thrusting a trowel at Jesse like a sword. By midsummer, the structure stood crooked in places but sturdy. Odessa spent her mornings there coaxing life from the soil, while Jesse pretended not to notice how she talked to the seedlings like they were old friends. One evening, as fireflies blinked against the glass panes, she emerged with a sprig of lavender and tucked it behind his ear. "For luck," she said deadpan. Jesse left it there all through supper just to watch her try not to smile. The real test came in August when a hailstorm pummeled the valley. They'd just finished the roof repairs again when the sky turned the color of a fresh bruise. Jesse found Odessa standing rigid in the greenhouse doorway watching the clouds roll in. "It'll hold," he said, though neither of them knew for sure. The storm hit like artillery. Hailstones shattered against the glass, the sound like 100 rifles cracking. Odessa didn't flinch. When it passed, they surveyed the damage, one cracked pane, a dented eave. Jesse was reaching for his tools when Odessa grabbed his wrist. "Later," she said, pulling him down into the damp earth. They lay there among the basil and bee balm shoulders pressed together, listening to the drip of rain through the hole in the roof. "We'll fix it tomorrow." she murmured. Jesse turned his head, breathing in the scent of crushed mint in her sweat-damp hair. "What's the rush?" he replied, and for the first time in his life meant it. That winter, when the greenhouse stood firm against the snowdrifts, Odessa placed the Prussian tools back in their box but left the lid open, a promise, not an ending. Outside, the wind howled through the cottonwoods, but inside the air smelled of growing things. And when Jesse kissed her, his lips tasted of the rosemary she'd hung to dry above their bed. The first time someone called her Mrs. Colton, Odessa nearly dropped her basket of herbs. Jesse choked on his coffee. "That's Miss Jameson," he corrected the wide-eyed shopkeeper, wiping his beard. "Unless you want to meet her knife." The man paled. Odessa just smirked and left an extra coin on the counter for his nerves. By harvest season, the greenhouse had become something of a legend. Women from neighboring homesteads began arriving at dawn trading preserves for cuttings of Odessa's magic mint that could cure a colicky baby or a surly husband. Jesse took to napping in the hayloft to escape the chatter, though Odessa always found him usually with a fresh biscuit tucked in his pocket as peace offering. Then came the letter with the Chicago postmark. Odessa recognized her cousin's handwriting before she even broke the seal. Inside was an invitation not for a visit, but for them to come see the World's Fair. "They've got an entire building full of plants from every damn country," she read aloud, fingers trembling slightly. Jesse studied the way her eyes lingered on the word Brazil. That night he oiled the hinges on their trunk. "You're not afraid?" she asked as they packed, folding her green cloak with more care than she'd admit. Jesse tossed her the hairpin with the smoky quartz. "Of what you forgetting me for some fancy botanist Odessa caught it midair. I'd come back just to spite you." They left at first light, the cabin shuttered but not locked. Mrs. Miller waved from her porch, already plotting how to borrow the greenhouse in their absence. As red Elk Crossing faded behind them, Odessa twisted in the saddle to look back just once. Jesse didn't comment. He just reached over to adjust the hairpin that had slipped loose in the wind, his calloused fingers lingering against her neck. Somewhere ahead, a train whistled. Somewhere behind the carrots would keep growing wild without them. And for the first time in her life, Odessa Jameson wasn't running from anything, just riding toward with a man who knew the difference. The road stretched open. The sky burned clear. And when she laughed at something, Jesse said the sound carried farther than she ever could have dreamed.